The title I chose for this address, "Don't Worry About That Nozzle Kid, because we don't do fires anymore," is meant to reflect what I see as a disheartening reality. That many of today's fire service leaders no longer believe fire suppression is our most important mission, or worse, still a part of our mission at all. This is very troubling to me because I tend to be a bit of a traditionalist. To me, the fire service is still dirty hose, brass nozzle tips, hose bed dividers with the paint chipped due to being whacked by couplings 1,000 times, seasoned firefighters who know what it means to pull a ceiling and know what to do when they're told to trim a window, and chiefs who trust their instincts and exude what Chief Dunn calls command presence. During the football season, ESPN aired commercials featuring veteran football players, and they'd ask the question, "Are you old school?" I guess in many ways I am, for I truly believe that tradition is important to the long-term survival of the fire service. And a friend of mine recently pointed out that the best fire departments in this nation know how to blend tradition and innovation, because in order to be successful, you need a measure of both. Progress, change, innovation, they're all important. But firefighting today, in the year 2000, still remains largely a gritty, risky, up-close and personal affair using tactics and techniques that date back decades. Even on the high-tech battlefield of today, it is the soldier and his rifle that still makes the difference in wartime. So until we make greater strides in the fire prevention and fixed suppression arenas, the firefighter and his nozzle will continue to be the difference between life and death for literally thousands of Americans threatened by fire every year. Now, let me share with you the first of several examples why I am a bit disheartened. The chief of a large metropolitan fire department in the West tells his recruits at the start of their basic training program the following: "If you're here to be firefighters and fight fires, you might as well get out of here now. We don't fight fires anymore. This is the new fire department." Well, to me, this is a fairly ignorant statement, considering in 1998 there were over 1,750,000 fires in this country, including 500,000 fires in structures that killed over 4,000 of our fellow citizens. In this chief's own city in 1998, there were over 400 serious building fires that claimed 3 civilian lives and injured 82 more. And let's not forget the firefighters. The inscription on the firefighters' monument in New York City refers to firefighters as soldiers in the war that never ends. And at least 109 brother and sister soldiers paid with their lives last year waging this war. So is it possible this chief has been brainwashed, has perhaps been given some bad information? Brainwashed into believing that since fires are down, the art and science of firefighting is no longer important, that our myriad other missions deserve more of our attention. Well, chickens always come home to roost, and nowhere will the impact of our service diversity be more tragically felt, and this is unfortunate, but more tragically felt than on the fire grounds of the new millennium. Now, let me ask you a question. Who in the audience believes that fires are down? Let's see a show of hands. All right, there's some hands up. I honestly thought in writing this address there'd be more hands. But let me explain something. Every time I hear the statement, "fires are down," I cringe. It hurts morale, discourages our new firefighters, and is in many ways a lie. Fires are down compared to what? What baseline data is being used? This small, albeit important, bit of information is conveniently overlooked by fiscal managers looking to slash firefighter jobs, looking to close your fire stations. And shamefully, this vital piece of information is all but ignored by fire chiefs who should be battling tooth and nail for more firefighters and more firefighting resources. So let's try and place this whole "fires are down" thing in perspective. Certainly, if we compare structure fire incidents today to the mid-1970s, fires are down. And that's the crux of the problem. Structure fire incidents today is compared exclusively to a statistically skewed 15 or 20-year period of time beginning around 1966 and ending in the early to mid-1980s. Anybody who lived through that period knows that this was a very unique one in our nation's history. Tensions boiling over in long-neglected inner-city neighborhoods, civil unrest brought about by the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. in the war in Vietnam, weak arson laws, and even weaker arson prosecution. And each of these complex issues combined to bring about a period of unprecedented fire activity that, like the social and political climate of the time, was also very unique. But if we compare structure fire incidents today with any other period in modern history, we find that structure fires are not down, they are up, and up significantly. Since prior to America burning in the NFIRS system, as Chief Coleman pointed out, fire data in this country was fairly unreliable and hard to come by. I chose to compare structure fire activity in New York City over a 50-year period. Not only is the record keeping more accurate, but important definitions such as what constitutes a serious fire remained constant through this period. And while there's no doubt some margin of error in my research, I feel the data is sufficiently accurate to provide insight into the issue of just how busy we are today compared to our brethren of a generation or two ago. And this is what I found. The peak year for structure fires in New York City was 1976. There were a total of 56,810 such fires, of which 4,880 required at least an all-hands assignment for control. And in FDNY lingo, an all-hands assignment means the entire first alarm is going to work. Now, in 1999, last year, there were over 3,500 fires that necessitated at least an all-hands assignment for control, a drop of 28% from 1976. But in 1976, 20% of all building fires involved vacant structures. So if we assume, and I believe we can with good confidence, that 20% of all serious fires also involved vacant structures, then the number of serious building fires has only dropped 10% from 1976. And if we compare 1999 to 1980, serious fires are up 6%. And if we compare to 1970, again adjusting for vacant structures, serious fires are up 15%. And if we compare to 1960, serious fires are up 200%. To 1950, they're up 600%. And one more important point. In 1970, the FDNY handled only 46,000 non-fire emergencies. I say only 46,000, but New York City's a big place. Last year, excluding EMS, the FDNY handled over 168,000 non-fire emergencies. So are we really not as busy? Are fires really down? Now I realize that during the 1970s, there were times when several serious fires occurred simultaneously, and less than an all-hands assignment may have been used to control those fires. But my point is, let's admit to ourselves that we are still in the business of fighting fires, and unfortunately, or fortunately, I guess, depending upon your point of view, we will be for a long time to come. And one more theory as it relates to our perception of fire incidents, and reflect on your own communities as I discuss this. Our perceptions have changed because fire activity is no longer concentrated in specific or distinct geographical areas. Fires are now more uniformly spread out within communities. The changing demographics of the past 25 years, as well as continuing suburbanization, has resulted in a redistribution of fire activity. Areas that were filled with new homes and businesses in the 1950s and 1960s are now joining the ranks of older neighborhoods. Buildings falling into disrepair, systems aging, and the neighborhoods that were old then are even older and more dangerous today. One neighborhood is just as likely to suffer a fire today as the next. The so-called busy fire companies may not be as busy as they were in 1976, but the traditionally slow fire companies are a lot busier, not nearly as slow. So my answer to this Western fire chief is, get your facts straight. Fires still occur, and in large numbers. And if individual fire companies are not as active as they were in the 1970s and 1980s, at least as far as fires are concerned, then guess what? You're the chief. It's your job to train them and make sure those firefighters are prepared. And here's another example of changing priorities. A probationary firefighter from a large East Coast fire department, fresh out of basic training. He's assigned to an engine company, just like the 14s here. At the start of his first tour of duty, he begins by familiarizing himself with his company's apparatus and its equipment. Certainly okay so far. But due to the emphasis placed on his department's new EMS initiative in Proby School, the first piece of equipment he checks is the automated external defibrillator before the hose and nozzles. Why is this wrong? I think it's wrong because it will ultimately hurt firefighters. Let me explain. Well, I'm not a big fan of fire service-based EMS, and certainly my friends in the audience can attest to that. I realize it's an integral part of many fire departments, and it has saved firefighter lives as well as many civilians. I know of a captain in a large urban fire department who suffered a heart attack while on duty, sitting at the housewash desk, writing his evening roll call. Next thing he remembered, he woke up in the hospital. His life was saved by the CPR and CFRD firefighters on duty, and the fact that an automated external defibrillator was not only located on the fire engine nearby, but that it was maintained properly, checked on a regular basis at the change of tours. And certainly more firefighters will be saved by fire service-based EMS in the future. But consider this. Whereas a defibrillator can only save one life at a time, a working nozzle on the end of a hose line in the hands of an experienced nozzleman can help save 2, 10, maybe even 100 lives, civilian and firefighter alike. So my recommendation is check the defibrillator, sure, but check the hose and check the nozzles first. What about the issue of trying to legislate safety? Certainly that was a big part of this morning's theatrical presentation, and all very valid concerns. And specifically, as was mentioned this morning, the 2 in, 2 out debacle. Who doesn't have an opinion on 2 in, 2 out? So consider the following statement from a commentary written by Captain Greg Falkenthal of the Vallejo, California Fire Department, which appeared in the March 1999 issue of Fire Engineering. And I quote, "Our greatest mistake was somehow falling under the illusion that legislation equals safety. Safety cannot be legislated, mandated, promised, or guaranteed by statute or any other magic wand. Practicing OSHA's 2 in, 2 out rule doesn't make a firefighter safe any more than walking into a garage makes you a car." Interesting words. Entirely true. I view 2 in, 2 out as a cop-out standard, a sham. When the 2 who are in get into trouble, what are the 2 who are out really going to do about it? What are they going to be able to do? My experience is that it may take up to a half dozen or more firefighters just to remove one, just one, who is in distress. So who's kidding whom? To me, and I know this probably will get some of you angry, but the safest way to operate, if there are only 4 personnel available for interior firefighting, I think is all 4 in. And the reason is that the search for victims will be completed much more quickly, but most importantly, water will be applied to the fire itself in a shorter time frame, which eliminates all the hazards that 2 in, 2 out was created to address in the first place. So if 2 in, 2 out is not the answer, how do we improve safety on the fire ground? Quite simply, we train and we staff. Captain Falkenthal continues, and I quote, "No mandate will ever take the place of intelligent decisions made by competent, well-trained and experienced fireground personnel acting appropriately based on the most accurate information available at the time. In other words, safety is an outgrowth, a byproduct, if you will, of sound fireground tactics employed by sufficient numbers of well-trained firefighters supervised by competent chief officers. Now, while we'll get back to the training issue later, let's look at staffing. Fire company staffing in this country is a disgrace. Consider this small career department in Upper New York State. Each engine company is staffed with a driver and a captain. Imagine taking 2 promotional examinations, tough exams, and passing them just to be the nozzle man. Yet that's the street reality for an awful lot of fire departments in this country. It may literally take 3, 4, even 5 companies from this department to arrive before they can legally comply with 2 in, 2 out. It is so grossly understaffed, it relies on its ambulance personnel to make up a rapid intervention team. Way back in the fiscally strapped 1970s, fire departments everywhere bit the bullet. We were team players. We took the hits to keep our community solvent. Although firehouses were closed and large numbers of firefighter positions were lost to attrition, the politicians promised us that when the better times came, we would get our people back, that our firehouses would reopen. We even made ourselves more productive by diversifying to ensure it would happen. Well, the better times are here. We are in the 107th or 108th month of the largest, longest economic expansion in our nation's history. But I don't see the staffing coming back, do you? We are continually doing more with less, and firefighter safety is the ultimate loser. And are we really fighting to get our staffing back? One fire chief claims his department was under tremendous pressure from City Hall to cut costs. He decimated the training division, closed companies, laid off 50 firefighters. He then turned around and returned $1 million in unused budget monies to the city coffers. Now, I always thought growing up that the fire chief was supposed to be on our side. It certainly betrays the trust of the firefighters that this chief is supposed to protect. And another favorite subject of mine, customer service. According to some, the fire service desperately needs lessons in how to treat our customers. We used to call them victims because victims don't have a choice. Customers do. But regardless, we are selling ourselves short when we say we need customer service training. The fire service may be the only organization, public or private, that still actually practices customer service. The United States has become, its economy and as a nation, a service-oriented one. But we know virtually nothing about good service. And I'm sure you could each come up here on the stage and tell the audience a tale or two about poor service. We have fast food workers who can't make change, bank tellers who can't count, store clerks who view the customer as the enemy. And if you call just about any private business or government agency on the phone to register a complaint or simply to ask a question, all you get is the runaround from either an impersonal computer, an incompetent person, or both. But consider the fire service, consider us. We have been setting things right for decades. Day or night, rain or shine, pull the box or pick up the phone, and we will come and solve your problem. And we do it courteously and professionally. And there's another issue closely related to customer service. Total Quality Management, or TQM. I'm sure you've all heard it. Has your organization required its members to attend TQM training? I'm sure some of you can say yes to that. But I don't believe a handful or more of people in this country actually know what TQM is. Total Quality Management is a system for controlling industrial production processes using advanced statistical techniques. The father of quality management is generally considered to be a gentleman by the name of W. Edwards Deming. In the wake of World War II, Japan enlisted the help of Deming to rebuild its shattered economy. The rest, as they say, is history. So in recent years, many soft businesses, as well as a large segment of the public sector, have adopted Deming-like philosophies. TQM has become the buzz for everyone from real estate agents to firefighters. But is this really TQM? Or is it perhaps a scam foisted upon us by some savvy entrepreneurs? I believe it is, because what I know about TQM training, at least in the public sector, is that it boils down to say please, say thank you, and answer the phone within 3 rings. Hopefully, we all learn the importance of saying please and thank you in kindergarten. So why don't we spend more time practicing how to stretch hand lines and force doors, which ultimately will serve our most important customers, the victims of uncontrolled fire, much better. And what about our cart before the horse training philosophies? Why do we train rookie firefighters to bail out windows before we teach them to properly stretch a line and put out a room of fire? Certainly learning how to survive emergencies on the fire ground is very important, and was all but neglected on the national level until Battalion Chief John Salka developed his Get Out Alive training program. And Captain Mike Lombardo of the Buffalo, New York Fire Department deserves mention. He won last year's FDIC Training Achievement Award because of his efforts in training firefighters in Buffalo and surrounding departments in self-rescue techniques. Well, I'm fortunate to be able to call each of these dynamic fire service leaders my friends. And I know they never intended Get Out Alive to eclipse basic firefighter training. And last year in his keynote address, Bob Pressler mentioned the fire department with young, aggressive firefighters. Each firefighter carried webbing and carabiners in his turnout coat pockets in order to be able to rescue and remove a trapped firefighter. But if you or I somehow got trapped or lost at a fire in this particular community, although these firefighters could rescue you, if they found you, they probably would never find you because nobody ever taught them how to search a smoke-filled area properly. Again, the cart is before the horse. We must put the cart back behind the horse and train realistically and frequently in basic firefighting procedures. Back to basics must never become just another hollow cliche. And as we told our students at the hot classes on Monday and Tuesday, right here is the greatest anti-bailout the nozzle tool that exists. Put the fire out, and your brother and sister firefighters will never be caught in that position, or at least the chances will be greatly reduced. And closely allied with our skewed training agenda is our love affair with gimmicks and the belief that technology offers the solution to all our problems on the fire ground. The introduction of hydraulic tools for forcible entry is but one example. While these tools are certainly helpful, have we become overly dependent upon them? How many firefighters in your department can still force a door with an axe and a Halligan? Or just a Halligan, and in a smoke-filled hallway without visibility? And consider a more recent development, thermal imaging technology. Fire departments everywhere have purchased thermal imaging devices or have had them donated. This is great. But my friend Stephen Woodworth, a lieutenant from the Atlanta Fire Department and a recognized expert on thermal imaging on the fire ground, he points out that thermal imaging technology is not the be-all and end-all. It is simply a tool to help firefighters perform their basic mission of searching smoke-filled areas for fire and for victims. It is not meant to replace sound search procedures and other time-tested fire ground tactics. One firefighter, dressed in his state-of-the-art personal protective clothing, was using a thermal imager at a training fire. Transfixed by the images viewed through the camera and isolated from the heat buildup due to his turnout clothing and hood, he suddenly saw everything in his view screen turn white. Flashover. This firefighter is lucky to be alive. And while thermal imaging and advanced turnout gear have made our jobs safer and easier, at the same time, they have also made it more complex and introduced new dangers that we should be aware of. And given the hostile nature of the fireground, technology must never take the place of sound judgment formed by good training and hands-on experience. In a nutshell, technology isn't and should never become a substitute for common sense. Well, now that I've identified a variety of problems, I'm obligated to at least propose some tentative solutions. And first and foremost, as a group, we must collectively admit that firefighting is an inherently dangerous occupation, and there's not much we will ever be able to do about that. It is manual labor performed under the most dangerous and uncomfortable conditions known to man. Firefighter injuries and deaths will continue to occur, and anyone who is so naive as to believe otherwise lives in a fantasy land. As Bill Manning noted in the editorially brilliant white cover issue, this is what a perfectly safe firefighting operation looks like. To achieve 0 firefighter deaths and injuries, you must have 0 firefighters on the fireground. Second, we must realize our limitations. The now classic book, In Search of Excellence, by Thomas Peters and Robert Waterman, is subtitled Lessons from America's Best-Run Companies. Chapter 10 is titled Stick to the Knitting. And in it, the authors point out that any organization that strays too far from its core strengths, that over-diversifies, so to speak, is doomed to failure. We cannot, as a fire service, continue to take on new tasks and responsibilities without paying a price. And that price, unfortunately, is a diluted ability to function at fires. We have truly become jacks of all trades, masters of none. We believed that diversity was key to survival. All it has really done for us is ensure mediocrity in our performance at fires. And what about diversity and staffing levels? Has embracing EMS and other services improved our staffing? Has service diversity ensured that you respond to every call with 4 or 5 personnel on an apparatus? Is the fireground, in your experience, any safer? The demands placed on our time by our diverse missions mean less time learning how to fight fires and getting to know the buildings we fight them in. We must reevaluate our priorities. Third, training itself must be refocused. It is a disgrace that fewer and fewer fire departments are able to participate in live fire training due to environmental concerns and restrictive standards that are often unrealistic and misguided. But our field of battle is unforgiving. We must train like we fight. Class A burn buildings, acquired structures. At the New York State Academy of Fire Science, recruit firefighters get to practice fire attack in a smoke building with sheetrock walls and furnished rooms. Highly realistic. And at the Rockland County Fire Training Center in New York, our flashover unit has exposed thousands of firefighters to flashover warning signs and given them a better understanding of fire development and the limitations of their personal protective clothing. The hot sessions here at FDIC, particularly live fire, engine company operations, search, truck company operations, allow firefighters to operate in real buildings under realistic conditions. As has been said, more sweat in training, less blood in battle. Let's restore realistic live fire training to its proper place. The environmental impact is minimal. The rewards will be amazing. Fourth, we need experienced, educated leaders. But where do good leaders come from? They must come from the trenches. It should be forbidden for line and chief officers to spend most of their careers in staff positions and then be allowed to assume command of line firefighters with little actual firefighting experience. Effective leaders must put firefighting first. I know that technical rescue is glamorous, hazmat is important, and emergency management is a current hot fad, but in the past 10 years, almost 50 times more Americans died in fires than in natural disasters, terrorist acts, and hazardous materials incidents combined. And good leaders must also be educated. We must support the efforts of Dr. Dennis O'Neill and the National Fire Academy. We must increase funding for the USFA and fire programs around the nation. Why is so much money being directed to emergency management, disaster mitigation, anti-terrorism initiatives, and hazardous materials response when they actually constitute a minimal threat compared to the fires that kill fellow citizens in ones and twos day in, day out, all year long? Fire departments, like police departments, who seem to really have the handle on this, must seize every opportunity for training and assist their members in obtaining training as frequently as possible. Local community college fire science programs, many of which have been abandoned in the last few years, should be rejuvenated, revived. And the internet offers a solution for increasing the education level of the fire service, provided the quality of the programs is high and access is widely available at home as well as in the firehouse. Fifth, we must gain control of the standards-making process itself. Why do bureaucrats think they know more about firefighting and what's best for us than we do? But we're out of the loop. As much our own fault as anyone's. We must get back into that loop. Become politically active. Help determine your own destiny, the standards that will keep you safe. Get behind the Pascal bill. Sixth, we must be sensitive to the changing face of America and how this will impact fire service recruitment and retention down the road. Almost 50% of our nation's population now belongs to a minority group. The so-called Generation X problem in education is real, and it must be addressed. Problems in education and discipline in society at large are migrating their way into the fire service. Fire training today is much more challenging than it was a few years ago. As a group, we must acknowledge these issues and begin formulating plans to solve them before it becomes a crisis. And lastly, let me say that I am proud to be a firefighter and very proud to be associated with all of you. Many of you, I'm sure, like me, are a little saddened by the shifting priorities of the modern fire service. One firefighter at the hot class on Tuesday told me that the fire service today seems to be a lot about nothing. One Eastern Fire Department has stopped using the title firefighter and now calls its personnel ERTs, or Emergency Response Technicians. Talk about a blow to morale. And imagine some little boy or little girl telling his mom or your daddy that they want to grow up to be an ERT. And while sagging morale may be a fact, we must always remember why we became firefighters in the first place, and that our traditional mission, fire suppression, is still very unique. As the late Senior Whip in Engine Company 48 in the Bronx used to say, "Sure, that's great, but can he make a long hallway? What he meant is that there are many people capable of performing the different functions on our diverse menu of services. All the functions except for one. Crawling down that hot, smoke-filled hallway, never really knowing if you might come back. And that's why we are unique. We are firefighters. We should be proud of that fact. So my dear brothers and sisters, keep making those hallways, but please, stay low, stay safe, and God bless all of you. Thank you.